I'm Honor from Honor Way Marketing, and I'm here with Nick Aslin from Zambian Ground Handlers today. We work with a lovely selection of people and places around Africa, and we represent them in the UK and Europe, even though today we've got a nice cross-section of people joining us from all around the world. Last week, we kicked off a series of webinars inviting our clients to come and chat to you. We've had lots and lots of requests for information, social media, updates, etc., helping people their websites, stories, etc. So we thought it'd be a nice idea to try and get everyone in and come and talk to you for a little bit about their products, their companies, situations on the ground, what's happening, and see if we can inspire you a little bit with some engaging, positive stories as well. Before I start today, we're going to set off with a selection of questions and answers at the end. So if you can share those maybe towards the later part of the presentation in the chat box predominantly. We have the two, so we've got chat and question and answer. But if we try and keep them all in the chat box, we will try and get to as many of them as possible. As Nick said, we will be following up with someone's just raised their hand. I don't really know what that means. Can you not hear me, or is it frozen?
Just saying hi.
Okay, maybe hi. Okay, so basically we will follow up. We'll be sending out some fact sheets. I know that Danny from Zambian Ground Handlers is putting together a fabulous manual on conservation in Zambia. And Nick and the team are also working on their rates manual, which will come to you with terms and conditions, but it's obviously at this time being quite a lot trickier to collect that information. Anyway, we are really delighted with the response today. Last week we kicked off with a very good attendance. Today we had 175 registered, so it's getting better and better, which I'm very excited about. So today we've got Nick here. As all of you, or many of you will know, I have always had a soft spot for Zambia. It's where my Africa journey started 16 years ago working at Tongabizi. And since then, I started on a way and have managed to, I've been lucky enough to work with several really cool places around Zambia. And over the years, I've always worked very closely with Nick. It started off with us traveling to the States on marketing trips when he was at Northern Car Safaris with Nick and Carol. And in more recent years, I'm really delighted to have actually formally started working together with Zambian Ground Handlers as a client. Nick moved to Zambia in 1992, but I'm sure he will tell you a little bit more about his journey. He started off with no Africa knowledge, and now I can't think of anyone better to speak about Zambia to you. So without waffling any further, I'm going to hand you over to Nick, who will, so he will hand over to you and chat more about Zambia. So here we are, Nick Aslin from Zambian Ground Handlers.
Thank you very much, Honor. I'm going to share my screen now in hopes that this technology works. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Honor, and thank you to everyone that that has tuned in today. I'm really excited by the number of people that have registered for today's webinar, and indeed for your geographic distribution. I thought it was going to be, it is mostly UK and Europe, but we've got people from Australia and from Canada, from South America as well. So very exciting, and thank you all for your attention. What I plan to do this morning is essentially to take you on a quick virtual safari through Zambia. I want to explain to you a little bit about our company and what we do and how we work here in Zambia, and also to talk about the elephant in the room, COVID-19, what's happening in Zambia, and what is planned for the immediate future. I always like to start off any presentation just making sure you know where we are and what we're talking about. So Zambia there is located in the middle of the southern part of Africa, extremely landlocked. In the pulled out map of Zambia, there's the main safari destinations in dark green, and we're going to be visiting most of those. I'd like to introduce you to my team. Normally we all work together, there's 7 of us. There's an office here in my garden in Lusaka, and we normally work together here. Everyone's working from home at the moment. Danny Rose on the right there is responsible for most of our marketing. She does the website and all our social media, and the rest of the team spend their days putting itineraries together for your clients. At the moment, we've been rather busy doing postponements and cancellations, but nonetheless, they're still all very much busy and but working from home. So that's the team here in Zambia. And then Honor, you all should know because she's the one that has put together today's webinar. And then Johan Brunzale represents Zambian Ground Handlers in the North American market, so he does what in that market. Just a quick word about our website and what we have tried to do with it. To start off with, Danny, as I mentioned, is responsible for the website and most of our marketing efforts. What we have tried to do is to create a one-stop shop. So there are pages on all the main camps of interest, all the different national parks, all the camps in Zambia, a little bit of information, a few of my personal thoughts and opinions on the camps, and then a whole bunch of the best images that camp operator has made available, and they're all easy to download in high resolution. So we try to provide all the information that you might need on Zambia when you're putting your websites together, when you're putting itineraries together, and you will find it all on ZambianGroundHandlers.com. So when you have a moment, please do have a look at that. We're not going to go into too much detail today on individual camps. I'm going to talk more generically about the different safari areas of Zambia. So if there are any camps or camp operators that you want to drill down on and find a little bit more information about, ZambianGroundHandlers.com should give you all the answers. So as I say, I think it's important at the moment just to give you a little bit of an insight as to what is happening here in Zambia with regard to the coronavirus and how we're handling that at the moment. We've been lucky in the last couple of months to have kept our numbers very low. They are starting to increase literally just over the last week, but we're still certainly in the hundreds rather than thousands of cases. And I think there have been 7 deaths attributed to COVID-19 here in Zambia. So we fear that the worst is coming, and we as we move into our cooler winter months, I fear that we may have a couple of fairly rough months ahead of us. However, it is very encouraging to see the rest of the world trying to drag themselves out of lockdown and try to get back on with business. So just to give you a little bit of an insight as to how we hope that will play out here in Zambia. I've been talking to a number of camps and from outside of Zambia actually in the last few days about people setting protocols for how people will socially distance in remote bush camps and safari lodges and the like when travel does start again. I can't give you a lot of definitives on that subject at the moment, other than to tell you that people are starting to look at that and to work out how they can ensure that your clients are safe when you come to Zambia and come back to safari. I had a good chat with Kira Langford-Johnson from ProFlight this morning, just before we came live, in order that I can give you the latest news in terms of flying around Zambia. They are not flying schedules at the moment. They're hoping to start up a reduced schedule to Livingston and to the South Luangwa in July. It will be a very skeleton schedule to begin with. They hope, as we do, that Emirates should start flying back into Lusaka sometime in August. And when that happens, that hopefully will be the trigger to more international travel into Zambia, and they will then start to roll out their schedules. They expect to release their 2021 schedule on the 1st of July. That has been delayed because, of course, it's very difficult to know which flights will be coming into Zambia. Until they know a little bit more about that, they're holding up on the release of their 2021 schedule. Let me just talk to you a little bit about the process of how we work here at Zambian Ground Handlers. When you come through to us with client inquiries for Zambia, we put together this This is just a quick snippet to give you an idea and to show you that we give you rack and net rates, all the camps in all the different seasons. A very useful tool when coming to put itineraries together. But obviously, we don't expect you to do the costings yourself. When you come through with an inquiry, we will give you a line-by-line costing along similar. In just a few hours. We're very used to working with people all around the world, and so we take into consideration the time differences, and we know how important it is you get that information so that you can compose what you need to put together for your time. So that's just a little bit of an idea as to how we work, how we put itineraries together at the quote stage. Now, let's start looking at the logistics of getting around Zambia, and then we'll take you on a little trip, virtual safari through the country. So this slide gives you an idea of who is flying in and out of Zambia. This is historic, obviously. SAA used to come up from Johannesburg 5 times a day. I think they are probably the most likely big change in Southern Africa. We're not too sure whether SAA are going to come back or in what form. Ethiopian are flying currently into Zambia, again on a reduced schedule, but they've got 2 or 3 flights a day and have had throughout this whole last couple of months. So they're flying from Addis into Lusaka. Emirates come from Dubai on a daily basis, and as I mentioned a few moments ago, they are hoping to resurrect their schedule into Lusaka in August. So we very much hope that will be the case. Nairobi, we have Kenyan Airways flying in, and there are good connections from Europe, obviously, through Nairobi, and there are daily flights from Nairobi. Interesting new addition to our connectivity here in Zambia is that there are daily flights from either Livingston or the Victoria Falls, the other side of the river, down to Cape Town with Kenyan Airways. Fly from Nairobi, stop off at the falls, and then down to Cape Town and back. So that is a good way of linking Zambia with Cape. And then there are flights, seat-in-plane flights that we can organise anytime from Mfui into Malawi. So they go to Lilongwe and then up to the lake or wherever clients are going to. So that's the international connectivity of the country. Looking now at domestically, how we connect the different safari destinations. Most people will start and finish in either Lusaka or Livingston. There are daily flights between Lusaka, Livingston, Lusaka and Mfui. And in the safari season, there are daily direct flights from the South Luangwa and Mfui into the Lower Zambezi and from the Lower Zambezi to Livingston. So those really are the 3 main tourist destinations, and they are all connected with pro-flight schedules on a daily basis. And there's no reason to think that next year's schedules won't be along very similar lines to what they were last year, planned to be this year. The Kafue has no scheduled flights in and out of the Kafue, which is the large park here just to the west of Lusaka. But there are seat-in-plane priced flights from Lusaka into the Kafue and from Livingston into one of 3 different airstrips in Kafue. And then there are also schedules from Lusaka and Livingston out to the Lua Plains, all the way over there in the west of the country. So we're going to start our virtual safari today in the South Luangwa, the country's premier wildlife destination. More tourists and more tourist camps in this park than any other, found there to the east of the country. The smaller park just to the north is the North Luangwa National Park. So the whole Luangwa River system, as it comes down from here where Malawi, Tanzania and Zambia join, it rises there and flows down and joins the Zambezi just downstream from the Lower Zambezi National Park. The Luangwa was famed for its population of elephants. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was home to the world's largest population of African elephant. We had almost 100,000. It was an overpopulation of elephants, and you still see the damage that they caused back then in the trees and the vegetation today, interestingly. The valley in more recent years has probably been better known for its very dense population of leopard and indeed other carnivores as well. Picture here of the wild dog, which is a real success story, not only in the South Luangwa, but all the way across Zambia. Actually, this animal really has made a strong comeback. 30 years ago, when I started on safari in the Luangwa, you literally would never see wild dog. But now I would say it is fair to suggest that your average tourist coming and spending a bit of time in the South Luangwa and the Lower Zambezi is likely as not going to wild dog. South Luangwa is a wonderful place for birding as well. Ornithologists, particularly in the green season, when the water levels are high, get a lot of migrants come down from North Africa and from Europe. This is a picture of a colony of carmine bee-eaters. They nest in August and September in the dry river banks in the Luangwa River, and really quite a stunning feature at that time of year. There's hides set up below these colonies, quite incredible. Over 450 species of bird call the Luangwa their home. Probably the element of safaris that we've become best known for over the years would be the walking safari. The Luangwa is regarded as the home of the walking safari. Norman Carr started the concept of seeing game on foot back in the 50s, and we've continued the push ever since then. I think if you can take one thing away from today's presentation about the way that we walk in the Luangwa and in Zambia, and its differences from any other safari destination where you may go walking, and that is the fact that we actually try to do our game viewing on foot. So we do what we can to sneak up and get clients up close and personal to big African game, rather than just taking them on a nature walk and doing their game viewing from a vehicle, which is perceived to be more safe. We regard the walking safaris in Zambia as very safe. This picture here shows the armed escort scout in the lead. The qualified safari guide will come behind the armed scout, and the tourist comes behind them. And there really is nothing more exciting than following up fresh lions or listening to the alarm calls and knowing there's a leopard around and doing your utmost and using skill to actually get in close and to get a look. So that, as I say, is one takeaway from today's presentation, is the way that we conduct walking safaris. They are somewhat different from the way that they're conducted in other national parks and in other countries. You can't really talk about the Luangwa without mentioning these two species. They are endemic. They're found nowhere else in Africa. Thornycroft giraffe and the Cook's wildebeest. It was the Thornycroft giraffe that, in order to protect that species, back in 1904, that the park was established as a game reserve, and the population is very strong and thriving. Probably less so with the Cook's wildebeest, but there's enough around, and plenty up in the North as well. But on a slightly more personal note, I think more important than all of the things that I've mentioned so far about being on safari in the South Luangwa, there is one element, a natural element that makes this valley so different and makes it so special, and that is the river itself and the way that it flows. For a river this size in this part of Africa not to be dammed is really quite unusual. The Luangwa has not been dammed. It has a natural flow, and the shallow gradient of the valley going down towards the Zambezi Valley means that the Luangwa River meanders across the valley floor. It winds its way slowly downstream. And what happens when a river does that? And these three pictures basically show you how an oxbow lagoon is formed. So the river meanders across the valley floor like this, creating very large corners, and then eventually the river takes the most direct route downstream, cutting off the old corner here and creating a new channel of the river. This old bend in the river we call an oxbow lagoon, it's a dambo, it's got various different names, but it is incredibly important to the ecosystem of the Luangwa Valley. Rich alluvium deposit soils create mixed vegetation that brings a very high carrying capacity, meaning that a lot of animals and a lot of variety of species can live in these habitats. And that is why the Luangwa is really quite as special as it is. And I can't overemphasize the value and the importance of these oxbow lagoon systems in the Luangwa and what makes it such a great place to be on the safari. This last image from the Luangwa shows you where all the camps are located. The Luangwa River flows down the eastern side of the national park, creating the boundary along most of the eastern side. As you can see, the camps are all labeled here, and they're all pretty close to the river itself. And as I said a minute or two ago, that is because there is such a high carrying capacity close to the river. The riparian belt, which is the 2 or 3 kilometers either side of the river itself, that's where the game is, and that's where the camps are. So, as I said earlier, I don't intend to get into too much specifics and details about the different camps. There's some fantastic camps throughout Zambia. These are all the Luangwa ones, the ones in red down here. That's the Bush Camp Company, and their main lodge here is in Fui Lodge. The green camps along this is the Lui River. That's the Time and Tide camps, bush camps, and they've got a couple inland and a couple on the main river. We've got Robin Pope safaris that utilize the Sefu sector here. They also have a couple of camps close to the main entrance of the national park. You've got Remote Africa safaris in the northern part of the South Park. They're the only operator that also has camps in the North Luangwa. You've got Lion Camp up in this area, right in the north of the park, one of my favourite areas of the valley. And then all the way down here, you've got a couple of camps, bush camps here from Kafunta, which is their main lodge, Three Rivers and Island bush camp. So I've missed out a few, but basically that is the distribution of the camps in the Luangwa. And as I said before, you'll find pages on each of those camps on our website. So from the Luangwa, we're going to pop down to the Lower Zambezi, down to the bottom of the Luangwa Valley, take a direct flight for about an hour and a half in a light aircraft from Mfui down to Jeki or to Royal Airstrip in the Lower Zambezi, which is located just to the south and east of Lusaka. Flights from Lusaka around about half an hour, so quite easy to operate that in a seat in plane basis rather than a schedule. There are scheduled flights, but chartering or seated plane is very easy for Lusaka because of its close proximity. The biggest single difference between the Luangwa Valley and the Zambezi Valley is the rivers themselves. I mentioned that the Luangwa hadn't been dammed. The Zambezi, conversely, has been dammed in several places along its course. So its control, its flow of water is man-controlled. The dam shortly upstream from the Lower Zambezi National Park is the Kariba Dam, which was created in the 60s. And it creates a very different style of river. It's slow flowing. You can see in this picture a lot of sandbanks that appear in the river as it drops its deposits in the river, and these larger vegetated islands are created. They're very good for the game as well. A lot of animals will swim out and spend time on these islands, and you also get a lot of channels running close to the main to the main river, and that's a very interesting part of this park as well. The flat valley floor between the river and this line of hills, that is basically where most of the animals are, and most of the camps in this in this park are again found along the river itself. So the biggest difference between the Luangwa and the Zambezi is that the Zambezi is navigable year-round, and so guests in camps in this national park will spend a lot of their time out on the water. This is a boat from Jiawa Camp. They take guests out, have a lovely lunch in the middle of the river drifting down, and also the ability to get into a canoe and paddle, not so much down the main channel of the river, but the smaller tributaries and the channels running close to the main river itself. Gives you an opportunity to get very close to the game that comes down to these channels to drink. A really exciting and tranquil way to do your game viewing. You're at the water's level, no noise, drifting down. It's really quite idyllic. Most of the guests that we send to the Lower Zambezi don't necessarily go there to go fishing, but most of them will throw a line in order to try and catch a tigerfish, a very exciting sport fish to hunt. And so, yeah, all the camps offer a bit of fishing as well, and most guests will try that. And, right. This is a very typical Lower Zambezi scene, walking safari with elephants just milling around in that water there, with all the anna trees or the acacia albida trees behind. A very, very typical Lower Zambezi scene. So a variety of activities in the Lower Zambezi, slightly more diverse than in the Luangwa, because of course you've got the river activities as well, walking and driving day and night. So again, a quick look at the different camps. Starting upstream of the national park, we've got Mvu and Baines River Camp, a couple slightly more budget-oriented camps. We've got Royal Zambezi here, again just outside the national park itself, with access to Royal Airstrip. The two camps here are Chongwe and Chongwe House. They're on the Chongwe River, which acts as the western boundary of the national park. And then all the other camps inside the park are all on the river. You come to Chiawa first. Oops. Sorry about that. Chiawa is the first camp you come to, then Sausage Tree and Potato Bush. Moving further downstream, the two brown camps either side of Old Mondoro are Tuscan, Maine, a relatively new operator down in the Lower Zambezi, and a very exciting one at that. And then the two camps furthest downstream are Anabasi and their sister bush camp, Amanzi. So that is the layout of the national park and where the camps are. Typically, I would normally advise staying in one camp in the Lower Zambezi and multiple camps in the Luangwa, 2 or possibly 3, because of the diversity of habitats. No other reason really. And I'm not saying that you can't stay in 2 camps in the Lower Zambezi. The variety of activities often makes that a good idea. But just the size of the Luangwa and the diversity of habitats means that you can get a lot of different experiences there, down to Lower Zambezi, and as I say, typically we would spend just one of the camps there. We're going to have a very quick look at the Kafue National Park, which is the country's largest national park, found to the west of Lusaka. It holds the record, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly how many species of antelope. I must get that number and remember it, but more species of antelope than any other park in Africa, I believe. So you're going to see roan and sable and a certain number of creatures that you won't get to see in other national parks in Zambia. So that makes for some special experiences. Probably more geared towards people that have been on safari before. Starters in Zambia would typically start off in the South Luangwa and the Lower Zambezi. But these images are of the Sangha Plains in the northern part of the Kafue. Really quite stunning, great game up there. And that's the one opportunity that you will get in Zambia to fly over in a balloon, fly over game-rich areas. So ballooning going on in the northern part of the Kafue National Park. So just a quick look at the geography of the park. Lusaka is found here to the west, and it's only about a 3-hour drive to the central area of the Kafue. So it is accessible from Lusaka by road. There's a couple of camps in the central part there, Kambi and Ila Lodge in the central part. There's not so much going on from a tourist perspective down in the southern area of the park, so we typically will send guests here and then move them up to the area in the north of Busanga Plains, where I mentioned the ballooning goes on. In between, you've got Jeffreys and McKeith with a couple of camps there, not so new anymore as an operator, but a very exciting operation there. And then you've got 2 wilderness camps. You've got the Mukambi Plains camp up on the Busanga Plains, and Ela Safaris is operated by Green Safaris. They are putting in a new camp in the Busanga, new bird's nest design of rooms. That was due to open this year. I believe that it will be open. So in a nutshell, that is the Kafui. And our last destination on this virtual safari is Livingston, down at the Victoria Falls in the southern part of the country. Lovely image here of the falls, gives you a real good idea of how it all works at the falls. But the other thing to take note is the buildings in the right-hand side here. This is the Avani Hotel Resort, and the buildings along this line here is the Royal Zambezi, the 5-star hotel, both of which overlook the falls. So the options in Livingston really are either to stay on a bed and breakfast basis in one of these large hotels, and those 2 account for most of the guests that we put into hotels. But more typically, we would house people in the private, fully inclusive camps upstream from the falls. They're just a little bit more conducive to the type of trip that we would organise for the clients. But a nice aerial view of the falls there. And just an idea of a few of the activities. Livingston Island here, I'll point that out on the falls. So that is Livingston Island, and you can imagine once you get out onto that island, the views of the falls are really quite special. So that is a lovely experience, and something that we often will organise ahead of time for guests visiting the area. Microlighting over the falls and swimming in Devil's Pool if you have the inclination. And plenty of adrenaline activities. The area has become quite well known as an adrenaline activity centre. So lots of bungee jumping, whitewater rafting, all that kind of stuff. So a quick look at the accommodation options in Livingston. You've got 2 larger hotels overlooking the falls that I mentioned earlier, the Avani and the Royal Livingston. Another couple of hotels, the David Livingston and the Waterfront, a little bit back, closer to town. And then you move out of town and upstream to the private camps. The first one here is Wilderness, Tokalea, and then you've got Sanctuary Retreats, Susi and Shuma. Moving to Thorn Tree Lodge, the African Bush Camps camp, which has been in place now for 3 or 4 years, a lovely camp. The one in the middle of the river is Sindabezi. Honour's dog that's sleeping at her feet at the moment, I believe, is named Sindabezi after this island camp. The sister camp of Tongabezi. Got the River Club adjacent to Tongabezi. Then a couple more sort of budget-conscious options. Chundukwa, Waterbury, and Islands of Siankaba, a little bit further upstream. And then the furthest upstream here is Royal Chundu, which has good access from Botswana if you're coming from Kisani. And typically it's by a very high-end camp. We would often transfer people there from Livingston by helicopter, given the full experience. So that pretty much in a rush, because I know you've all got places to be and we've got some questions to come, but that pretty much concludes my virtual trip through Zambia. I hope that I've covered most things. Obviously we can approach things with questions now if I have missed anything out. And as I say again, www.zambiangroundhandlers.com should answer any questions that you've got. So I'm going to unshare my screen. Am I? Anna? How am I going to do that?
You can do.
There we go.
Thank you very much, Nick. We have got some questions coming in, so let's deal with them. There was one question. I've just tried to collate them together so I don't miss them out. There was one question just at the beginning. A lady had to get a call and she missed the information about the borders opening due to COVID, when that might be, or are they already open? So can you just repeat that one, please?
Yeah, I think that is something that I forgot to mention and I remembered halfway through. Our borders are open, but currently, anyone arriving in Zambia needs to quarantine for up to 14 days. It is a little bit unsure. They say that they do test you on arrival, and they say that as soon as you get a negative test back, then you can go on home. However, friends of mine did that, and it took them 2 weeks to realize that they'd lost their test. So, yeah, it's a little bit nebulous. At the moment, you do have to quarantine, and so that pretty much precludes international tourism. The flights aren't really coming in apart from Ethiopia. So yes, the borders are open, but there is a quarantine requirement. I cannot tell you how long that's going to last for, but we very much hope that that will be lifted within a couple of months.
Okay, because then the next question is, if you did have to quarantine, is there any way that you could then quarantine at camps, or would it be in Lusaka before going out to any of the camps?
Yeah, again, this is something we have been talking about, but at the moment, no, it's not possible. You have to quarantine in a government authorized facility. There are hotels in Lusaka. There's the Hilton in Cairo Road and the Radisson Blu. Both those are regular tourist-style hotels, and both have been registered as quarantine centres, as have a lot of other sort of B&Bs and guest houses and things like that. Indeed, friends of mine who got fed up with waiting for their test registered their guest cottage. So I don't think it's difficult. So hopefully we may be able to evolve that and get some safari camps registered as well.
Okay. Do you see, this is from Switzerland, do you see any opportunities to develop the North Luangwa as a wildlife destination more?
I don't know that we really want to develop it much more than it is at the moment. There's 2 great camps there operated by Remote Africa Safari. It is a very remote location. That isn't going to change anytime soon. And there is less variety of habitat, so equally less variety of species. It's a very exciting place to be on safari, but one of the most exciting elements is the fact that there's just you and a couple of other people in the national park. So I think that's quite special, and I don't think that that is going to change dramatically in the foreseeable few years. So I think we'll keep it as a little gem for those that can get that.
I kind of agree, having been there last October, and not seeing anybody but lions and elephants. So then that also leads nicely into the next question, which is, why is there a lack of camps in the interior of the Lower Zambezi National Park as well?
Well, there isn't much space. I mean, you've literally just got a couple of kilometers from the river bank to the base of the hills. The hills run fairly close to the river. The national park extends back through those hills by quite a distance. So that is the bulk of the national park. But that's not where the animals are. There is Tuscan Maine, who I mentioned, have got a couple of camps down the river. They are very keen to develop a camp up in the hills, and they've got a site there, and they've done a little bit of work. So they are an operator that is keen to do something up in the hills. But it really would be kind of a one-night stay. The game is down on the valley floor next to the river. So the hills are fun and give you a good view, but that's not what the game is.
Okay, then we've got a question saying, camps and lodges outside the national parks, i.e. Royal Zambezi and the game management area, are they allowing off-road and night safari activities that comes from Andorra?
Yes, they Royal Zambezi that you mentioned are on private land adjacent to the national park. So yes, they can also be in the park doing night drives, and frequently are, and sometimes they will boat guests down in the afternoon, pick them up with a vehicle and drive back to camp as a night drive. But they have also developed a network of roads and also watering holes, interestingly, which bring the game on their own land, back behind camp. So yes, the game viewing just adjacent to the park there is actually very good indeed.
Quite a lot of questions coming in. We've had another question asking if there are any lodges, camps in Liuwa and Sioma National Park.
Sioma and Gwezi National Park, which is on the Zambezi, or close to the Zambezi River, west of Livingston and south of Liuwa Plains. No, there's really not much going on there. You need to pretty much self-drive and self-cater. So that's, no, not much there. And in Plains Park, is that Sindebezi?
Sorry. There was someone at my door, would you believe? I'm really sorry.
In the Liuwa, go and answer them and I'll tell them about Liuwa Plains.
Okay, thank you. And there's also another question about how to combine South Luangwa, Lower Zambezi and Kafue, how to justify the cost of transfers in terms of different experiences and how to combine it all.
All right. Liuwa Plains, we were just talking about, Time and Tide have King Luaniki Camp in the Liuwa Plains, and there are a couple of community campsites there as well, again for self-drive and self-catering clients, but for most of the clientele that we would work with, there's only one camp option in the Liuwa Plains, and that is King Luanika. And whilst we're on that subject, it has a very different season from the rest of Zambia. So you want to be in Liuwa Plains either in May or in November, December, for various reasons. So coming on to your next question, how do we combine the different areas? Typically, as I mentioned before, scheduled flights, direct links between South Luangwa and Lower Zambezi. There are flights into 3 different airstrips in the Kafue National Park. What we do quite often is drive people from Lusaka into the central part of the Kafue, drive them up through various different camps in the Kafue, destined for the Busanga Plains in the north, and then we would fly them out from there to Lusaka or to Livingston. There was something about justifying the expense of...
Yes, how do we justify the cost of air transfers in terms of different experiences, i.e. you should go to A for X and B for Y, combining it, etc.?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to trying to put together a well-rounded safari itinerary, and that's something that I really enjoy doing, combining different areas and different experiences, different camps, different fields, and yeah, you need to get from one destination to the other. So if you've got a well thought out and well sold itinerary, there are reasons why you will go from the Bush Camp Company in the south of the South Luangwa, for example, up to Lion Camp. There's plenty of good reasons. And I can explain that if you don't know them, but I'm not going to do that today. But yeah, then the Lower Zambezi is a completely different safari experience to the South Luangwa, so worth combining, as is the Kafue. Now, we are all in this industry constrained by our clients' time and, more importantly, their budget. And it's up to us as industry professionals to balance the different experiences and try to fit it all into the budget.
Thank you. Question from the Netherlands. Now that national parks are closed and there's no movement and control, do you encounter more poaching happening in Zambia in the parks at the moment?
Yeah, this is something I didn't really touch on. Yes, but it's not too desperate. The national parks are actually open, and I'm in conversation often with people that are living in Fui and thoroughly enjoying the South Luangwa National Park because there's no tourists. I'm also involved with a couple of different conservation organisations. On the board, Luangwa Conservation Organisation and Lower Zambezi as well are doing a lot of work in that national park. And then there's another wildlife crime prevention, it's called, based here in Lusaka, that works regionally, that I'm strongly involved with as well. So I can say from a conservation perspective that the efforts to conserve the habitats and the wildlife of this country have not faltered at all. We are having to look to slightly different areas traditionally for funding, because a lot of the funding came from the tourist dollars that came into each of those national parks. But happily there is funding around. The one area that we can't control is the fact that when tourists come to national parks and the camps are operating, whether it's the staff driving around or the tourists on game drives or walks, that does help to conserve the wildlife, undoubtedly. And so that is an area that we've lost out on in these months. But that is being countered by putting extra foot patrols in and things like that. So yes, it is certainly an issue, but it's something that we are very aware of. We're working hard, and I personally have quite a positive feel about the fact that conservation is not being left behind.
If you were to combine camps from Zambia and Zimbabwe, what would be the best route for this? Does it have to be done via Lusaka and Harare, or are there easier variants? It's always a question.
The Mana Pools National Park is very popular and is a stone's throw from the Lower Zambezi, but it's very difficult to combine. You need to essentially fly up to Lusaka, clear customs, fly to Korea, but clear customs and then get into the Mana Pools. You can also drive down from Lusaka, upstream, crossing the river and boating downstream is not that easy, unfortunately. But obviously it's easier to combine Zimbabwe from the falls, getting to Wangi National Park and various options that end of Zimbabwe. But typically, I normally advise people to try and decide which side of the river they want to go, whether it's Mana Pools or the Lower Zambezi. Robin Pope Safari is operating a camp on the Mana Pools side now, and that is pretty popular. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for both sides of the river, but it isn't as easy as one would like it to be to combine.
One from the UK, which is, would you recommend making new bookings for 2020?
No, I think we need to wait and find out what is going on. You know, we're working very hard at the moment on postponements, and you know, a lot of people for the back end of this season, September, even then October, November, are holding on. And they can do that. The camps, everyone is making it possible for people to push those decisions as to whether they postpone or whether they travel at the tail end of this season. They're able to make those decisions further down the line when we know a little bit more. And things are starting to evolve quite quickly. So I'm hoping that in a month or two, we'll be in a good position to be able to know when people can start traveling again. But I think now to make a new booking for September, yes, we can do it. But we might as well hold it all on provisional basis and just see how it goes, because no one can guarantee anything at the moment.
That sort of answers the other question I've had, which is, do you still have clients booked in for August and September, or have most postponed, certainly up to October time?
We've actually got plenty of people still in our books for this year. We're getting around to them all, but no, plenty of people that have not yet made a decision as to whether they're going to be travelling in September or October.
I have had an answer to the question about the antelope species in the Kafue National Park. 21 was the answer there. I then decided to ask if he could name them all, so he's working on that one. But
so I'm glad I didn't guess at a number, because I did think it was a few more than that, but I'll take that.
Going on from that one in the Kafue, what is the season for the hot air balloon in the Kafue?
They start that on the 1st of August. It used to be included in the cost of the wilderness camps, if you spent 3 or more nights with wilderness on the plains. They changed that last year. They now charge guests $100, so it's really not too much. And they charge them that in camp. And the reason for that is because it is weather dependent. And so if they pre-booked and prepaid a flight and weren't able to do that flight, then it's complicated. So they have changed it, and it is available to any guest staying at Wilderness, and it's $100 a pop. Good value.
It is very good value. Scrolling down, there seems to be not a lot of difference between the luxury safari lodges and the camping opportunities in terms of price. So what if people are looking for more affordable lodgings?
There is a good variety of budgets catered to throughout Zambia in all the different national parks. Typically, the more budget operations will be outside the park and quite different. Most of what we work with, the camps that we work with, and the itineraries that we put together are medium to high end. Zambia is not a cheap destination, but it is possible to do it on a budget, and there are camps that cater to that. I always think that you need to be more aware of how a camp is operating and what they're offering when you go further down the budget. And there are a couple of excellent alternatives. Flat Dogs is one that jumps out in the south. In the lower Zambezi, I think I mentioned Baines, and the further upstream is Vu, which is a budget offering. But with that, you're further outside the park. And in Livingston, the slightly cheaper camps tend to be further away from the falls, but that's their only downside, really. There's some fantastic, very good value options, and that's what we're looking for. We're not just looking for cheap price, we're looking for good value.
I've had a question about Kasanka National Park and the bats. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, we get somewhere in the region of 15 million straw-coloured fruit bats that arrive in a very small patch of woodland in the Kasanka National Park sometime in November, and it is a phenomenal sight. So yeah, it's a very short season, November through until mid-December, and the bats descend on this small area in the Kasanka National Park, and you see them flying off in the morning and flying back in the evening, other way around. But yeah, no, quite phenomenal. Not easy to get to Kasanka. You need to charter in a specialist trip, and we put together a couple of trips a year for the bats. And we've got a group from the States going up there this year, and they combine it with Fui Lodge. It's a little bit after the peak season in South Luangwa, but that is exactly the time that all the elephants are walking through the reception at Fui. And then also combined with Liwa Plains, because that is a fantastic time to be on the Liwa Plains. So a really exciting trip. And I'm really hoping that trip's going to be operated this year. It's November, it's a long way off. So fingers crossed on that.
Definitely. I have to maybe come out for that. So then that leads into the next question, which actually is, what about safaris in December, January, or is it raining too much during this time?
No, it's not. Early rainy season, December and January. I mean, I've known it when we haven't had any rain before Christmas. But typically the rain would start sometime in November, and it would be raining fairly regularly in December. But there are advantages to that time of year. Those early rain storms are quite dramatic, huge thunderheads, and they build up, and often will rain for an hour or two in the late afternoon. So it's quite predictable. The air is very clear. The colours are bright. The migrant birds are starting to arrive. I love being in the bush in December. Absolutely fantastic. Very good for photography as well. Colours.
Skyscapes as well. One thing is quite important, because obviously we talk about walking in Zambia, and I have had the question, are there options in the South Luangwa for game drives, or is it just walking? And I think it is that's an important one, really.
Yeah, I didn't put a picture in of a game drive in my presentation. Maybe I should. But yeah, people will spend most of their time in a vehicle rather than on foot. And I think that myself and my colleagues over the years, in the last couple of decades, have actually possibly banged on a little bit too much about walking safaris in the South Luangwa. They are fantastic, but it's certainly not all that you do. And you will typically spend more time in a vehicle than on foot. But getting out on foot is a big part of it. It's very special, and it's done very, very well in Luangwa. So yeah, we do always talk about it, and sometimes I think we put too much emphasis on it. I apologize.
Yeah, but lots of opportunities to do some fantastic game driving if you're not confident enough to walk. So the best of every world. Question about the Luangwa again, water activities. Someone said they missed if there are still boat tours available. Is that just at certain times of the year?
In the South Luangwa?
Yes, in the South Luangwa.
The only time guests will get out onto the Luangwa River itself is from mid to late January through until the 1st of April. Time and Tide and Robin Pope Safaris both offer river safaris. They open up one of their bush camps further upstream and they combine it with the camps in the central area that have an access to all-weather road network. And you'll get in a boat and you'll be taken up to a bush camp. And it's phenomenal. It's very, very exciting thing to do. Again, you know that there's no one else up there, and it's wonderful to be there when the river is high. But that is the only time, and those are the only two camps that will offer any kind of river experience.
Golly. Sorry, they keep coming in, so it's great. If one hasn't already seen the Vic Falls and won't like to visit them again, if one has already seen the Vic Falls and doesn't want to go again, would you still suggest traveling to the Lower Zam, or rather spend the full time at Luangwa? My answer to that would be absolutely to go to the Lower Zambezi. But depends, everyone has a different view, don't they, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, we're saying that whether you should go to the Lower Zambezi because you've been to Livingston before, two totally different parts of the river. Yeah, definitely. The Lower Zambezi will complement any safari experience. If you've seen the Victoria Falls and don't need to see it again, then leave Livingston out of your itinerary. And we do that for a lot of people. So.
Just on the subject where you just mentioned that photography is pretty brilliant in December, January, which area would you recommend the most? Well, that would have to be the South Luangwa, because the Lower Zambezi is generally, apart from
there are a couple of camps that are open December and January in the Lower Zambezi, so you can get access to the Lower Zambezi. But to be honest with you, the South Luangwa would be the emphasis of your trip, possibly Central Kafui. But and the Lower Zambezi is there, but the roads are not very accessible, so you're mostly going to be on a boat. But yeah, it's a lot of the remote camps will close at the end of October, so you have less options available.
A question about Luo Plains and the world's second largest wildebeest migration. Do you often include this in itineraries? Is it difficult in terms of accessibility, cost and lodging? Well, actually, you've kind of answered it already when you talked about Luo Plains in November time, didn't October?
Yeah, November, December, the wildebeest are moving in large numbers across the Luo Plains. It's fantastic. It's a short season. And well worth a visit. Only one camp, high-end camp there, as I mentioned before, King Luanika. Access, it's a long way out to Western Province, so it's quite an expensive flight. It's not a cheap place to get to. It's not a cheap place to stay at, but it's well worth it.
And there are a couple of other options. Don't Jeffrey and McKeith also do seasonal trips there?
They do. There's a couple of different Kafui operators that will offer mobile trips to the Luo Plains at that time of year. You're absolutely right on it.
Just clarification on night drives in national parks. We had the question already, but someone seems to think that they are permitted in national parks, but they are. There's a breathing space time, isn't there, to get back to camp?
Yeah, we've always done night drives in national parks, and back in the 90s, we used to in Luangwa. It was a big selling feature because there were no other national parks in Southern Africa that allowed A, walking, or B, night drives back in those days. That's changed now. Most parks do, and so many safari experiences in Southern Africa or even East Africa are on private concessions anyway, and then they can make up their own rules. But we've always been able to do night drives in the national parks in Zambia, and typically you'll have an afternoon drive, stop for a sundowner, and then use your spotlight to get back to camp for maybe an hour in the dark, and you catch all the crepuscular animals as they come out. And yeah, it's a very important and popular element of any safari.
Finally, is there? It says, I mean, this is talking about the Kafui, because you've obviously got the southern part of the Kafui, which is quite remote and quite far away from anywhere. But it says, would you send clients to the south of the Kafui, or is it a region that you would almost struggle to recommend over, say, the Basanga Plains?
I apologize to the southern Kafui as an area. I was a little dismissive in my presentation. Yeah, if people really do want to explore the Kafui, they can drive up from Livingston and drive through the southern part and go all the way up to the top. Absolutely. However, my reason for being a little bit dismissive of it is because, you know, I spend my time trying to put together well-rounded safari itineraries for people. In order to do the central and the northern part of the Kafui, which is what I mostly talked about in the presentation, that's going to take you a week. So that's half of most people's time in Zambia. And so then I'm trying to juggle and make advice as to where we should send people. And yeah, the southern part of the Kafui to me doesn't have enough in it to make it more relevant than, say, the South Ruangwa or the North Ruangwa or the Lower Zambezi or various other places. And that is why I think we don't end up including it in that many itineraries. It's a shame, but it's just a fact of life. We've got too many options in Zambia.
I've had a question of, is it possible to do multi-day walking safaris staying at fly camps, and where would you, and what would you advise?
Robin Pope Safaris is a company in the South Ruangwa that has been doing those sorts of multi-day walking trips for many years now. They have their mobile operation on the Mupamadzi River in the top of the South Ruangwa. They also have their Luangwa bush camping product, which is kind of dome tents, and you cook your meal over the campfire with your guide, and you can do that for 1 night or 2 nights or 3 nights, and really is a fantastic walking experience. So a number of different operators, Bush Camp Company, Time and Tide, Shenton's, will all offer to combine their bush camps with walking transfers. But in terms of high-end mobiles, then I think Robin Pope Safaris are the ones that are doing that for long. And again, most of that's all in the South Ruangwa. Time and Tide at Chongwe and Lower Zambezi have a sleep-out option as well. So that's becoming more popular these days.
And then just a couple more. Oh, I think there's been... What is spectacular about Lower Zambezi? I know, hang on. I think there might be a bit of confusion between the Lower Zambezi and the Upper Zambezi. So the Upper Zambezi is where the Victoria Falls and Tongabezi would be. The Lower Zambezi is beyond Kariba, where we have where Nick talked about and you know, the various camps along the river where you would be able to go and do canoe safaris, fishing, river safaris, walking. So they're slightly different areas. Just because the question, so which you wouldn't experience in the Luangwa. I think also the difference between the Luangwa and the Lower Zambezi is that you can really get out onto the river in the Lower Zambezi and enjoy a lot of the experience from the river, whereas in the Luangwa it is all the wildlife around the river, isn't it? So I think we'll pass that one on, and I'll write to them or call you personally. Is it possible to drive from Lusaka down to the Lower Zambezi and then boat transfer into the camps?
Yes, it's possible, but it's not something that we normally arrange for the camps further downstream in the park. But yeah, you can drive down to Chirundu. It's about 2.5 hours from Lusaka. Go to Gwabi camp, and they've got some boats, and they will boat you from there to anywhere in the Lower Zambezi. But as I say, it's only half an hour's flight from Lusaka. It's quite cost effective, and for the types of itineraries that we put together, almost always we would fly guests in and out.
a quick one on which areas have got tsetse flies.
Oh, they're all over the place. Southern part of Kafue, certain areas of the Luangwa in certain months of the year. Yeah, there are tsetse fly. They're very good from a conservation perspective. It means that there's never been a conflict between domesticated animals and wildlife. So we always give tsetses a bit of a big up. But yeah, no one likes to be chowed by tsetses. And some areas of the Kafue are not so good with tsetses, and a couple of areas of the South Luangwa as well. Not so bad in those.
And then I've just got a couple of operator more questions, which are your STO rates the same as booking direct? Can you arrange educational trips? Do you send out a regular newsletter with info like specials, etc.? Does Zambian Ground Handlers accept direct bookings? And Nick, is that a dummies for Safari for Dummies book on your shelf?
No, it's not. It's something else for dummies. No, it's some computer for dummies. No. And the answer to all the other questions was yes, apart from the direct bookings, which was no.
But also the STO rates are not the same as booking direct, are they?
Yes. The rates that, well, it depends who's asking me. I mean, I'm assuming that everyone that tuned in here is in the trade, and therefore the net rates that we provide to tour operators who book their Zambian safaris through our office, those rates will be the same rates that they would get if they went to the camp and got an STO rate from the camp. And that is typically 20% less than the rack rate that the client should be paying. It's all pretty standard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I had one question about your shirt, which they love, and said, where did you get it?
It's actually London. But it's my camouflage shirt.
It's a great camouflage shirt. I think it's brilliant. Oh yes, how many accommodation options in Lusaka on the premium range?
My favourite overnight in Lusaka is Latitude 15 Hotel, which is
down the road.
Yeah, just a couple of 100 meters away from where I'm sitting. It's a small boutique hotel, very stylishly designed, lots of art, and yeah, there's a couple of big hotels. There's the Radisson, there's Protea, there's Hilton, but I prefer something a little bit more African, a little bit more stylish, and so Latitude is our go-to for Lusaka.
Okay, and then I think we will just, in terms of Benguelu and Shubil, have you any accommodation options opened up? Also, what is the best time and chance to see the Shubil and access?
Yeah, the African Parks, which is a conservation organisation, they have been working in the Benguelu area for a long time now, and they took over the old Shubil camp. They've rebuilt it, they've opened it. I actually have not been there since they reopened it last year. I'm looking forward to getting out at some stage. And that is the one accommodation option available in the Benguelu. And in terms of seeing Shubil, June, July, early season, very good for Shubils before they start sort of moving back away from that area where the camp is. Fantastic destination for ornithologists. Birding life there is wonderful. And of course, you've got the Shubil Stork, which is a weird one.
Very weird. Okay, and then last one. Are there possibilities for photographers to make sightseeing flights with small planes where they have an open window? And if so, where?
It can be arranged. There's a couple of small fixed wings that are available for charter in the South Luangwa. Also, Remote Africa Safaris, John Coppinger has a microlight, and that's pretty good for photography. Again, in the falls, you can go up in the air, take photographs. Fewer options in the Lower Zambezi. The only fixed wing plane based in the Lower Zambezi belongs to Conservation Lower Zambezi, and they use that for patrolling the park. So anything else you would need to bring in from Lusaka in order to do a charter flight, which is just going to access the cost.
Excellent. And then the last question, I think, is combining Zambia and Malawi. So
Yeah, we do it quite a bit, and it's a great combination. From the South Luangwa, there's easy flights over to Lilongwe, and then down to Luwandi or Mukulumadzi, camps down the south, or to Kaiamawa, or other camps on Lake Malawi. Yeah, we are Zambian experts through and through, as it says on the box, Zambian Ground Handlers. But we do make an exception when it comes to Malawi, and we do a little bit of Malawi when it's an add-on to Zambia. It really is a great combination. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. They keep coming in. There's a lot. I think I've had a few people that have had to leave by now. We totaled up to 135, Nick, so you did good. We've had lots of thank yous. There was one last one saying what's happened with the copper mine project at the Lower Zambezi, which there was rumours of at one point. Completely called off.
Yeah, it's all off at the moment. Yeah.
And other than that, I think we will be sending out a recording of this. We've had lots of thank yous, so I think that's about it, Nick. We've done it.
Thank you, Honor, and thank you to everyone that's still tuned in for your attention.
Well, I just want to say one thing before we go, which is where I'm going to quickly share my screen, is before I go, I'm going to actually, how can I do this? There we go. Before I go, I'm actually going to be selling some tribal textiles masks, also from Zambia in the South Luangwa. So if anyone is interested, please drop me a line. They are made out of African wax cotton, and it will help you. They're not hospital ones, but they are giving you 70% safety. So I just wanted to send that through. But also I want to say a huge thank you for being here today. If there's anything we can do to support you during this time, in terms of information or just having a chat, or if you want to go into something a bit more detailed, then either myself or Nick can certainly set something up. But thank you very, very much, and have a lovely day. In England, the weather is shining beautifully, so I hope some of you will get out. But yes, thank you very much for your support from all around the world. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, Honor.
Take care. I'm going to end this now. Bye. Lots of love, that shirt, Nick.